Hello there, this is Al24 News, live from Algiers, and coming up next. Major fatalities were left after tornado hit several states on the United States and the Midwest. Kentucky was one of the most affected states, with hundreds of deaths and several missing persons plus. President Cyril Ramaphosa is being treated for COVID-19 after testing positive for the viral infection. Also coming up, the British coronavirus alert level has been raised from 3 to 4 due to the spread of Omicron. And finally, Human Rights Watch said Myanmar military junta is blocking needed humanitarian aid from reaching millions of displaced people and others at risk. Hello again and good evening. Those were today's headlines. First, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Ayman bin Abdulrahman inaugurated the 29th Algerian Production Fair, which is slated from the 30th to the 25th of December at the Exhibition Palace Cefax Le Pain des Maritimes here in Algiers, under the theme of strategy, creativity and efficiency.
Prime Minister, Minister of Finance Ayman Abdulrahman inaugurated the 29th Algerian Production Fair. The premiere was accompanied by Minister of Trade and Promotion of Exports Kamal Rizieq, top officials of the economic sectors, as well as representatives of diplomatic bodies accredited to Algeria. Ayman Abdulrahman emphasized the importance of integration between military and civil mechanical industries, especially engines, and affirmed that reaching 45% integration is the desired objective.
The percentage of integration in the mechanical industries, especially engines, is still lagging behind, and we need to step up the pace to reach at least 45 to 50%. It is of vital importance to achieve this objective in mechanical industries. If we take developed countries such as Germany as an example, we notice that 45% of integration is of a great deal. Hence, if we manage to reach that in 3 years, it will be a great achievement.
The Prime Minister expressed Algeria's will to support the integration and stressed on the necessity of expanding mechanical industries technologies into other fields.
We're hoping that your work will cover even civil industries. This is what we call a genuine integration. You manage to master the mechanical industry technologies. We remain optimistic as to the fact that you would continue to serve other fields of endeavor, such as agriculture. This is what we mean by national integration. Hopefully the military industries will be leading and pushing it forward.
It is worth recalling that last year's Algerian Production Fair edition was cancelled due to COVID-19, and that this year's edition will be held until 25th December at the Palace of Exhibitions in Algiers under the theme of strategy, creativity and efficiency, keys to the economic development and access to foreign markets.
Major fatalities were left after tornado hit several states of the U.S. in the Midwest. Kentucky was one of the most affected states, with hundreds of deaths and several missing persons. Joe Biden signed an emergency declaration and said that the government will do everything to help and provide everything that is required. More in this report.
The tornado that hit at least 5 states in the U.S. is considered to be one of the worst in the country's history since 1920. According to the U.S. National Weather Service, it could be classified as an EF5, the most violent category, and the first in the country since 2013. The devastation caused by the enormously powerful storm killed more than 80 people. Many are missing and homes were left powerless in several states.
It was lightning bad. We lost power for about 2 hours now, and then my phone died. So it's like I have no idea to get a hold of him. I have no idea what's going on, and we're just worried sick. We just want to know if he's okay.
Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear declared a state of emergency, saying that this is without a doubt the deadliest tornado past our state, and activated the National Guard after storms. Kentucky Governor stated that the tornado struck a candle factory in Graves County, killing 110 people, and that only 40 were rescued and the number of deaths will rise.
Now, earlier this morning at about 5 a.m., we were pretty sure that we would lose over 50 Kentuckians. I'm now certain that that number is north of 70. It may, in fact, end up exceeding 100 before the day is done.
The Edwardsville fire chief declared at least 6 people have died in an Amazon warehouse collapse in Illinois, adding that the rescue portion of the operations was now over, leaving room for casualty recovery. President Joe Biden signed an emergency declaration for Kentucky, directing federal aid to 15 counties.
Everything it can possibly do to help. I've spoken several times today with the head of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, as well as the director of FEMA, who's already deployed emergency response personnel to these states. I also, and apparently it has just been announced, but I also approved the emergency declaration that was requested a couple of hours ago by Governor Beshear of Kentucky.
Mr. Biden stated that he's keeping a close eye on this situation and has spoken with the governors of Arkansas, Illinois, Missouri, and Tennessee. Tornadoes is a weather phenomenon that affects the United States every year, but several scientists have warned that climate change is increasing the frequency of deadly, powerful, destructive storms.
Artificial intelligence is South Korea's next tool to apply COVID-19 precaution measures. South Korea government will use face recognition and closed-circuit video camera to track the movement of infected people, despite risks of invading the patient's privacy. On Sunday, coronavirus infection in the United States exceeded the 15 million since its appearance so far, while the Delta mutator is still dominating new infections.
The number of coronavirus infections in the United States surpassed 15 million for the first time since its emergence, with the Delta mutator continuing to dominate new infections. States in colder regions of the country are witnessing the biggest surge in new infections, including Vermont, New Hampshire, and Michigan. Rasha Walensky, director of the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, stated in a White House briefing that about half of the U.S. states have recorded cases of the Omicron mutant, but the Delta mutant still represents 99% of the current cases of corona.
Although we don't have all the answers on the Omicron variant, initial data suggests that COVID-19 boosters help to bolster protection against Omicron. And we should remember that still over 99% of cases in this country right now are caused by the Delta variant, which is driving increases in cases and hospitalizations.
The number of hospitalized patients is also on the rise, up 20% since the Thanksgiving holidays at the end of last November. And over the past month, deaths increased by 4.6%, as the number of corona deaths in the country exceeded 800,000 people. Each day, almost 3 million booster doses of the 3 approved vaccines are received, the highest rate since regulators announced additional booster doses. Experts are suggesting that a high increase in number of cases in the U.S. will occur due to Omicron mutant.
The latest of the coronavirus and the new Omicron spreading all over the world in this report.
We can see Omicron spiking now in London and some other parts of the country. Here in the capital, it probably represents about 40% of the cases. By tomorrow, it'll be the majority of the cases, and it's increasing the whole time. And sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalizations, and sadly, at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognize the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
2 Danish crew members of capsized boat were missing in the city of Baltic Sea after overnight collision with the British vessel in the busy maritime path of Sweden. The ships were sailing in the same direction of the island of Bornholm when they crashed in the fog and darkness. Rescue boats and helicopter hunted for hours. However, the 2 crew members are unlikely to survive long in water temperature around 4 Celsius. France Pacific Archipelago territory New Caledonia voted overwhelmingly Sunday to reject independence in referendum. The decision was welcomed by French President Emmanuel Macron, while pro-independence groups boycotted the referendum. More with Nabil Khazini.
New Caledonia remains French after the third referendum where New Caledonians voted to remain part of France. 96% of voters rejected the latest bid for independence, and a turnout of just over 40% suggested the indigenous Kanak people have not given up on dreams of independence.
We had 3 referendums. The first one was won by the pro-France supporters, and this third referendum was requested by the pro-independence side. They decided not to participate. I'm sorry, but France is clearly won tonight.
French President Emmanuel Macron hailed the result and said New Caledonia will remain French.
This evening, France is more beautiful because New Caledonia decided to stay as a part of it. It is for all of us to write our history with ambition and respect. French women, French men, dear compatriots from New Caledonia, France is proud to be your homeland.
The votes were part of an agreement concluded with local political leaders in 1998 under the name of Nomia Accord that promised more political power would be granted to New Caledonia and its original population by the French. France has a military base in New Caledonia, which makes the Pacific archipelago strategically important to France. French leaders were afraid an independent New Caledonia would lean more to China, which has built a political influence on other islands. Another referendum is expected by June 2023, which will decide on the project New Caledonians want to pursue.
Thousands of Salvadorans demonstrated this Sunday against the dictatorship action President Nayib Bukele, the violation of human rights and the constitution, and the implementation of policies that do not benefit the people in the country. Scotland in Spain faced major disappearance. The home of the half of 2 Spanish flora and fauna is being destroyed. An urgent reaction is needed to protect the wildlife in the Iberian Peninsula. Nabil Khazini.
La Mancha wetlands, situated in the district of Castilla, form a unique habitat for highly specialized flora and fauna. The wetlands cover an area of 40 square kilometers and consist of 27 wetlands. The wetlands are surrounded by Mediterranean forests, seasonal grasslands, and fields. These farming activities have the greatest negative impacts on the groundwater and wetlands conservation.
The wetlands of the Iberian Peninsula are home of around 50% of flora, fauna on our country. 60% of it has been destroyed over the last century, and this is because of pollution, desiccation, or because of other usages such as agriculture.
For the irrigation of the fields, an immense amount of water is withdrawn. The use of nitrate and phosphate has negative impacts on the wetlands biology. Spain is the third country in the world with the most wetlands that are uniquely important. They store carbon, protect against floods, and offer habitats for 1 in 10 of the world's species. A report published by the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands found that 35% of the world's wetlands, which include lakes, rivers, marshes, and peatlands, as well as coastal and marine areas like lagoons, mangroves, and coral reefs, were lost between 1970 and 2015.
At the conclusion of the Group of 7 meeting in Liverpool, British Foreign Minister Secretary Liz Truss warned that negotiations that have resumed to save the Iran nuclear deal are Iran's last chance, and warned that Russia against any invasion of Ukraine.
At the end of the Group of 7 meeting in Liverpool, British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss warned that the resumption of negotiations to save the Iran nuclear deal is Iran's last chance. And she warned Russia against any invasion of Ukraine.
This is the last chance for Iran to come to the negotiating table with a serious resolution to this issue, which has to be agreeing the terms of the JCPOA. This is the last chance. And it is vital that they do so. We will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. And it is vital that they come to the table and are serious about the negotiations.
Indirect negotiations between Iran and the United States, mediated by the Europeans, resumed at the end of November in Vienna in an attempt to save the 2015 nuclear agreement aimed at preventing the Islamic Republic from acquiring nuclear weapons. According to Liz Truss, the meeting of the G7 foreign ministers expressed a united front against Moscow, which the Westerns have accused for weeks of preparing for a possible invasion of Ukraine, despite the Kremlin's denials. Liz described the invasion in case happened by a strategic mistake.
Well, what we have to do is deter Russia from taking that course of action. I've been very clear it would be a strategic mistake for Russia to do that. And what the G7 meeting this weekend that's taking place is about a show of unity between like-minded major economies, that we are going to absolutely be strong in our stance against aggression with respect to Ukraine. There will be severe consequences if anything were to happen, but also make sure that we're building security and economic relationships with like-minded partners, including Ukraine, to protect them in the future.
The threat of unprecedented sanctions was issued in the past few days by Washington, especially President Joe Biden, who spoke by phone with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin.
Iran's chief nuclear negotiator Ali Bagheri stated that the European countries failed to present any constructive proposal or initiative amid effort to revive the 2015 agreement signed with Iran, while the G7 countries restated the need for Iran to stop what is described as a nuclear escalation. Bagheri added that the European parties, in reference to Britain, France and Germany, which are among the major powers trying to save the agreement, failed to come up with any initiative to resolve the differences regarding the lifting sanctions on Iran. To Asia, Emirati capital Abu Dhabi will host the Zionist Prime Minister as well as the U.S. delegation. This visit comes in framework of discussing sanctions over Iran nuclear activity as well as strengthening ties to avoid conflicts in the region.
Trade and tourism ambitions for the United Arab Emirates are the most important sectors for which UAE is hoping to keep steady relations with regional countries. This ambition sets this Gulf U.S. ally in crossroads as the conflict between Iran and the Zionist entity, as well as the United States, is witnessing high tensions over Vienna nuclear talks. For this sake, UAE is seeking to strengthen its ties with its superpower ally, the United States, the Zionist entity, as well as its old adversary, Iran. Emirati capital Abu Dhabi will host the Zionist Prime Minister in addition to the U.S. delegation, in hope of warning companies about compliance with sanctions over Iran nuclear talks. An Emirati senior official was also sent to Tehran in bid to contain tensions and rivalry between the two countries. This Emirati move marks a shift in the country's foreign policy, which is, according to Emirati experts, retreating from military adventurism after the wave of a series of conflicts in the region during the last 10 years. As stated by Anwar Gargash, a UAE senior official, Emirati government has no will to bring the United States military intervention for any other conflict, explaining that his country needs to avoid major conflict in the Arabian Peninsula.
Number one is we have no interest in embroiling America in another conflict in the region. If Afghanistan and Iraq were traumatic to the United States, they were also traumatic.
UAE, which forged ties with the Zionist entity last year, shares the same concerns with the United States and the Zionist entity concerning the Iranian nuclear ambitions, as no positive results have been revealed yet during Vienna talks. Gulf countries rely heavily on the United States in terms of protection. However, there is a deepening uncertainty over the U.S. role in the region.
The world's largest oil exporter expected a surplus of 19 billion rials or 2.5% of GDP next year, its first surplus since going into deficit following the drop in oil prices in 2014. Despite a surge in oil prices that helped refill state coffers depleted by the pandemic, the kingdom intends to limit public spending. saying in Asia, Chinese customs authorities impose new food safety measures on all producers and exporters of foodstuffs to their territories by year-end. This move triggered European companies to express their fear of losing one of the biggest and most important markets.
A giant market of exported goods in the Asian continent became a difficult spot for food-producing countries. Chinese Customs Authority issued new rules in concern of imported food safety in the country. This new Chinese issue stipulates all manufacturing, processing and storage facilities abroad need to be registered by year-end for their goods to enter the giant Chinese market. Frozen and chilled foods have already faced severe rules last year due to COVID-19 disinfection measures. Foods including beans, nuts, unroasted coffee, and a list of other foods are among 14 categories deemed high. The rules only apply to facilities making finished products to be exported to China, but it provides little flexibility to change sourcing or labels. Experts say these measures taken by the Chinese government aim to better oversee the large volumes of food entering Chinese ports and place responsibility for food safety with manufacturers rather than governments. China's last move in this concern raised fears of European exporters and urged the European Union to send letters for more clarity and more time for implementation. It's worth noting that the Chinese government urged its population priorly to stockpile food and daily products.
Coming back to the coronavirus and Omicron spreading all over Europe, let's watch this report.
According to the presidency, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa tested positive for COVID-19 on Sunday after leaving the state memorial service in honor of former Deputy President F.W. de Klerk, but is showing only mild symptoms. As stated by Sky News report, Boris Johnson, British Prime Minister, said the first patient died after contracting the Omicron variant of the coronavirus, and confirmed in the meantime that the idea that Omicron is a milder version of the virus should be set aside.
Earlier today, the UK's 4 chief medical officers raised the COVID alert level to 4, its second highest level, because of the evidence that Omicron is doubling here in the UK every 2 to 3 days. And we know from bitter experience how these exponential curves develop. No one should be in any doubt. There is a tidal wave of Omicron coming, and I'm afraid it is now clear that 2 doses of vaccine are simply not enough to give the level of protection we all need. At this point, our scientists cannot say that Omicron is less severe, and even if that proved to be true, we already know it is so much more transmissible that a wave of Omicron through a population that was not boosted would risk a level of hospitalisation that could overwhelm our NHS and lead, sadly,
Australian Health Minister Greg Hunt confirmed today that international students can now return to Australia from December the 15th, 2021. But not into every area. However, Queensland and many other states announced that they would reopen their borders to domestic hotspots and international students. The United States reached more than 800,000 COVID deaths, marking yet another tragic milestone, as officials push up vaccination efforts in the face of rising cases and fears that the new Omicron variant could cause a new wave of infections. Britain raised its COVID alert level as Omicron variant spreads rapidly, considering medical authorities' warning about hospitalizations that are likely to rise over the coming weeks.
Inflation continues to climb in the United States. It reached 6.8% last month, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, after 6.2% in October, which represents its highest level since 1982. Usama Ayadi clarified.
Amid the spread of the new COVID-19 variant Omicron and the international economic crises that major world powers are witnessing in the so-called post-pandemic period, the USA is still living a high price surge and unprecedented inflation. Many declarations of American economists in the White House and the USA sounded reassuring to the population, explaining that these inflation rates were just a transitory period of economy. Americans now are claiming this long-lasting price surge, and declarations of economists do not seem as reassuring as they were in the immediate period after the last wave of COVID-19. A report issued by the American government came to reinforce the last statements of economists, stating that consumer price index soared to 6.8%. Price soar cannot pass in an unseen manner, as large consumption products consumed on a daily basis by U.S. citizens soared up to 21% for some goods. Reasons of this inflation in the United States and the world came after businesses closed or cut hours, and consumers stayed home as a health precaution. Employers slashed 22 million jobs. Economic output plunged at a record-shattering 31% annual rate in last year's April-June quarter.
The Turkish economy faces a stifling crisis in time when the Turkish lira lost a third of its value as it reached the verge of 14 lira against a dollar, which is the lowest level it has witnessed in 2 years of successive economic shocks, which has further complicated the already dire living situation of the people. Marwa Balayour.
Thousands of workers and trade union members gathered in Kartal, Istanbul to protest against the Turkish economic crisis and ask for higher minimum salaries, full of concerns over President Tayyip Erdogan's risky new economic policy and forecasts of another interest rate cut on Thursday. The Turkish lira crashed as much as 7% in just a few minutes to a new record near 15 to the dollars on Monday. The central bank previously kept the lira below the 14 level, intervening in the foreign exchange market 3 times in the last 2 weeks by selling dollars. This led to an organization of rally by the Confederation of Revolutionary Workers Trade Unions of Turkey, in which demonstrators marched through streets holding banners and signs, with several speakers addressing the crowd from a stage and demanding the minimum wage to be raised to 5,200 liras per month. The sudden slide left the currency with half the value that it had at the end of the last year, powering inflation in a big emerging market economy which depends heavily on imports. Commerce Bank said in a note,
"Last week's apparent relative stability of Turkish lira was artificial and unsustainable. Now we see the build-up pressure unfolding, driving lira weakness to the next level. Any further attempts of central bank to stabilize Turkish lira by interventions is probably bound to fail."
The lira slid as far as 14.99 against the US dollars currency in thin market liquidity from Friday's close of 13.889 by 8:15 GM time. It had trimmed losses in volatile trading and stood at 14.44. Turkey's central bank, under pressure from Erdogan, is expected to cut its policy rate by 100 basis points to 14% this week, despite inflation soaring to 21.3% last month. Erdogan has repeatedly advocated further rate cuts as he promotes a new economic plan prioritizing economic growth, credit, production and export, despite widespread criticism of the policy from economists and opposition politicians.
West Africa's regional bloc, known as ECOWAS, is threatening further sanctions against Mali and the country fails to make concerted progress toward holding democratic election in February.
West African leaders have demanded that the junta in Mali sticks to its plans for February 27th elections and threatening further unspecified sanctions if the head fails to commit to returning to democracy, as an additional time after Mali witnessed military coups in August 2020 and May 2021, sanctioning officials deemed responsible for delaying elections and threatening further measures. ECOWAS leaders decided that sanctions would be imposed in January if Mali did not move to stage polls, while Bambaku, the head of Mali's government, had earlier promised to provide the bloc with an election timetable by the end of January 2022. They also warned that there were no clear indications of a return to constitutional order in neighboring Guinea. Guinea's military junta had pledged to hold elections within 6 months of taking over power. The bloc said that the Guinea's leaders have assured them that a national transition council would be in place by the end of December and that council will propose a timetable. The regional leaders who met in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, also discussed the deteriorating security situation in the region, where armed groups have stepped up violence in several countries, including Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso and Nigeria.
Real Madrid again and again is undefeated, and yesterday's games was crucial point to win the title. As far as for Barcelona, they are still suffering down in the bottom.
Real Madrid strengthened their already commanding position in the title race on Sunday by defeating Atletico Madrid 2-0 to move 13 points clear of the defending champions in La Liga. Even though Atletico has a game in hand on their rivals, the advantage is significant and may be decisive even in December. Also, Sevilla, who last won the Spanish title in 1946, are the closest challengers, 8 points back and having played the game forward.
Max Verstappen became the first Dutchman ever to win the Formula One World Championship title when he won a dramatic season ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix on Sunday. The Red Bull driver notched up a 10th victory of the season when he took advantage of a second safety car to overtake 7-time champion Lewis Hamilton on the final lap after Nicolas Latifi crashed.
Barcelona's nightmare week ended in more disappointment on Sunday as they conceded in the 86th minute to draw 2-2 away at struggling Osasuna. After losing at home to Real Betis last weekend and being dubbed into the Champions League by Bayern Munich on Wednesday, Barca could only muster a point against Osasuna, who sit 11th and are now winless in 8 league matches.
US Open Championship Emma Raducanu was due to feature in the exhibition event in Abu Dhabi from Thursday, alongside leading players, including Andy Murray. But Emma's test positive for COVID-19 prevents her from participating.
Mbappe opened the scoring with an early penalty and then grabbed the second goal just before halftime after being set up by Lionel Messi to get his 100th goal in France's top flight since moving to PSG in 2017. The French striker, who also scored 16 league goals for Monaco at the beginning of his career, doesn't turn 23 until later this month. The victory allowed PSG to extend their lead at the top of Ligue 1 to 13 points from Marseille, who won 2-0 at Strasbourg earlier on Sunday and have a game in hand.
Kevin Durant scored the season-high 51 points for the Brooklyn Nets, while LeBron James posted a 30-point triple-double for the LA Lakers against Orlando Magic on Sunday in the NBA. Durant's points tally helped the Nets to earn a 116-104 victory over the Detroit Pistons, while LeBron's 30 points, 11 rebounds, and 10 assists helped the Lakers to 106-94 result against visiting Orlando.
To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Take care of yourself. Good night.